Alright, let me show you what I'm working on at the bench here. It's one of these. It's the Behringer RX Pro Professional 16-input low-noise line mixer model RX1602. I bought this almost exactly about 5 years ago, and it is a 1 rack unit high mixer, 8 inputs for that run in stereo. So there's 16 inputs technically, but it's 8 stereo inputs all in one unit. This is its front panel. I disassembled it to clean the pots. It had scratchy pots, and you can see there are a whole lot of them. 3 per channel, 2 output level controls, a monitor and effects send control, and then there's a separate level output control for headphones. So there are a lot of pots associated with this thing, and a number of them were scratchy, so I opted to clean it all out while I had it out of the rack. Since I've already taken this apart, I can't show you that process, but I can show you the process of putting it back together. This front panel section of the mixer is a single aluminum extrusion, and I'm going to show you how the circuit board goes into this. First, you need to match up which end goes in. LEDs are over here, the LED windows are over here. The way they've designed this for assembly, you take the entire circuit board, shove it in sideways toward the back of the extrusion. See, there are kind of a couple of raised places here, and there's a big raised place in the back of it where the screw holes are, where the rest of the case attaches. I'm trying to get this wedged in here so that the circuit board is toward the back of the entire assembly. I'm sort of spreading this extrusion apart with my fingers, with my free hand, like that. If I feel it bind up, I just have to stop pushing it and readjust things so it will push relatively freely, because I don't want to put a lot of force on any of those pot shafts. So it's already trying to go forward here, so I need to kind of work it backward and try again before I push for, there we go. And once I have this thing worked all the way in sideways, like this, see how now the pot shafts line up? Now I can try to push the whole thing forward from behind, like this. Yeah, just like that. Now all the push button extenders, the pot shafts, pushed all the way through. The headphone jack has come through its hole. So now, here, let me light this up a little bit better so you can see. So now this circuit board is resting up against this ridge. So now I'm going to take those plastic strips that I had pried up from along the side where they were glued in. I'm going to put them back in position. First, there's some little pieces of adhesive down here I'm going to try to pick out of the way before I go any further. Okay, I wanted to show you what it looked like to do this. Here I am just taking my thumb and pushing in on this plastic strip to fit it in between the circuit board and this raised place in the back of the front panel, to make sure you clear the leads of the components that are sticking out the back. So I'm just going to take my thumb and work this the rest of the way in on both sides, and that's going to be boring to watch, so I will skip that process, and then I'll show you what I do next. Okay, here's how the inside of the mixer looks when it's all put together. I've pushed these plastic strips that you see on either side into the gap between this raised part of the extrusion and the circuit board itself. I just worked it in with my fingers. Now, this is in here pretty solidly, but I don't want to just leave it like this. I am going to want to use some kind of glue, and I'll go through that process, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Before I do that, I wanted to show you something on the inside if you have one of these. If you look right here, there's a little loop of wire that's soldered between two pads on the circuit board. See, it's later labeled MON and FX. It stands for monitor and, well, FX. The idea here is that when this thing arrives new, the loop of wire is actually connected over here between these two places, not these two places. And what this does is it selects whether or not the monitor effects output, and there's only one output on the back for this, whether or not that output comes from before the fader, the volume, in other words, the volume control for the channel, or after it. So if you're like me and you want to run a reverb on your entire keyboard rig, you may have used the front panel controls. You use the front panel controls to set level for each of your keyboards or whatever kind of inputs you're using here, and this monitor effects send will either take output from before this fader or after it. If you have the monitor effects output coming before the fader, it means that even if you have these kind of turned down because the output of your instrument or whatever is rather high, it means that your reverb unit will still be getting signal at full volume, regardless of how you have this set. I don't find that particularly useful, and I can't imagine a situation where that would be a normal way to have it be. So at some point after I got this thing, I desoldered the wire loops from here and soldered them here instead, and that makes the thing behave in a sensible way if you're using reverb effects for your keyboard rig. Anyway, that's how that works. These are inexpensive mixers. It cost on the order of $150 on the street, but so you can expect some corners to be cut as far as construction techniques, which is why this thing doesn't have dip switches or separate output, separate pre and post effects jacks, or a switch up here that would send a switch for each individual channel, which would send its output to the monitor effects send. No, it's much more bare bones than that. The thing is, there really wasn't anything else on the market like this. As I remember at the time, you could get much more expensive 8-channel keyboard mixers for rack mount use like this, but darn if you couldn't find one that was in the same price range and wasn't 2 or 3 U high instead of just 1, which is important to me when rack space is kind of at a premium, or have a lot of additional features like equalization or something on each output, which to me is just superfluous. I have no use for it. So that's how this fits into the rig. Hopefully now that all the pots are cleaned, this thing will behave much better. And I will say that hooked up and working, this is just fine. It's not a bad unit. It's just not very well maintained. It's not something you can really maintain very easily. So let me show you now about how I'm going to glue this. So what I'm going to try to do next is glue in these 2 plastic strips that I had pushed in with my fingers to keep the circuit board up against the little ridge where it's supposed to be positioned. I bought two different kinds of glue to experiment with. One was Aleene's Turbo Tacky Glue, which is a white glue not unlike Elmer's. It does not seem to dry clear. It dries kind of a milky white color. And this is Weldwood Contact Cement. Both of these just bought at Lowe's, very readily available materials. In my tests, the Weldwood Contact Cement, behaved more like the original glue. Remember, the point here is not to glue this in here super hard and permanently so that it never comes out. You want to glue this in such a way that will keep the parts in place, but can also be removed for the next poor soul who has to take this apart and work on it. I've heard all kinds of tales about how these things fail out. LEDs stop working, channels stop working, what have you. That may yet happen to me or to somebody else. So all I'm going to do here is take the glue applicator and just put small amounts of glue that cover both the strip. You see, I'm making a mess. I'm making a mess on paper towels, so that's fine. Just want to lay a little bit of glue partially on the aluminum and partially on the plastic, and just let it go at that. No more than that. I don't need to go all the way up and down the thing. That's not necessary. Just leave a little on the plastic and a little on the aluminum is all this needs. It would be very easy for someone to come along here with a small screwdriver, a pen knife, something like that, or the other small blade, and come right in here and undo what I've done.